Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected. I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu, and on the show, I'll share the interesting and inspiring stories of artists, critical thinkers, thought leaders, and art professionals on a wide range of topics about life, work, society, success and failure, and the ways in which we navigate life. We talk about our inspirations, concerns, and the ideas that motivate and propel us to create. Much of the show centers on visual arts and its pervasiveness in our society, how culture shapes our lives, and the responsibility of artists and curators not only to be truth tellers, but to advocate for and care for the massive impact that culture plays in our lives, from the things we believe in to the ways in which we understand ourselves. As I travel to art fairs, gallery openings, and events within the creative industries both in the U.S. and abroad, join me in discovering and learning about some of today's most interesting and dynamic artists and creative professionals. If you're new to the show, I'm glad to have you here. If you've been on this journey with me for a while, welcome back. Let's get it. On this episode, I'm joined by the Afro-descendant French Caribbean artist, Julien Creuzet. In the episode, Julien shares his artistic journey and his passion for exhibitions. I first discovered his work last year at the 60th edition of the Venice Biennale, where Julien represented the French Pavilion. His immersive work is translated in his new exhibition at the Bell at Brown University. We talk about the continuation of the work that he first showcased last year and this new exhibition currently on view at the Bell. We speak a bit about this being his first solo institutional show in the US, and that it's an evolution of his presentation at the French Pavilion in the Venice Biennale. Julien explores themes of national representation, accessibility, and the importance of creating discussions through art. He delves into the autonomy in his creative process and how his identity influences his work's adaptability across different cultural and political contexts. The exhibition at the Bell reflects on the colonial history of Martinique and the many connections that he draws between different regions, the waterways in Venice, the nation of France, the waterways of Martinique, as well as the site in which Brown University sits in Providence, Rhode Island, which is very steeped in the history of the transatlantic slave trade. As we dive into this episode, listen to Julien speak more about his work and his practice and some of the ideas that are guiding him through this exhibition. Let's dive into my next episode with Julien Creuzet.
My parents give me a name and is Julien Creuzet. I'm born in suburb of Paris and I grew up in Martinique during maybe 16 years. I make my studies in art and actually I'm an artist. I like make a sculpture, I wrote poetry, make a video, record music, and do everything I would like to do and I need. The most beautiful thing I like to do in this world is make exhibition. I like that.
I love that you shared that. So, Julien, it's such a pleasure to have you on an episode of Everything is Connected. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today about your exhibition at the Bell. It's your first solo institutional exhibition in the US. I remember the first time I encountered your work last year at the French Pavilion. I remember walking into the pavilion and being confronted with materials and colors and strings and things hanging from the wall and the brightness of the space as well. And I'm really interested to hear you share how this exhibition, currently on view at the Bell, is an evolution of your presentation. Can you speak a little bit about the relationship that you've cast between these two presentations and to your point about your love for exhibitions, these two exhibitions? Can you speak about the dialogue between them?
Yes, thank you for your question. Venice is a very international context with some idea about what's mean a national representation and how the different culture politic decide to be represented or to be illustrated. And when I do the French Pavilion, it was how I can share some exhibition, this installation for people can go to Venice for many reasons. For example, how I show for my island, for people I meet in the different part of the world. And we start with first idea to make some podcast, but it just a simple reading, and we make some research and we produce a reader like in your university, or you can make a group of text for creator studies, and we decide to find if we can find a nevralgic point between some imaginary of different parts of the world. And we make these books with text from in English, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in French, of course, and all these texts by, I don't know, Instagram or YouTube, something like that, can travel and can be accessible for many people who don't have the possibility to go to see the Venice Biennale. In the same time, we make the books also, and we try make a books not expensive for young people have the possibility to buy the books with less 30 euros, for example. Buy the books, have like an important group of texts, and also continue to learn about ocean imaginary everywhere. That was a point. And in this moment, I have some possibility, and we decide, for example, work about if it's possible to some energy of the French Pavilion can travel physically and go, for example, to a university. And we start with Brown University. Next week, I'm open another version of the French Pavilion in the Art School University in Normandy. It's another version of the show. And in August, we open another version in Virginia, for example. And that was how, for example, we can go out of a certain context of art contemporary world and maybe go more in the discursive place, pedagogical place, like a university, and maybe start make a dialogue, or when every teacher, every university context can take in charge what's mean an exhibition, what happened with the work, etc. That was a certain idea we would like to do.
Yes, and as you share being able to showcase this work in multiple spaces, to take it out of its original context, to give it a new life, to make the work more, what I interpret to be somewhat more adaptable, there's a flexibility in being able to see the work in different spaces with different iterations, and also new work, newly commissioned work, or alternative ideas that are shown in different spaces. I think what's so lovely and so wonderful to be able to reflect on is how a body of work can have multiple lives, and it can have multiple life cycles over time. And that depending on the physical space within which a work is placed, changes the reading of that work.
Yes, it changed a lot of things. And for example, with the show in Bell Gallery, we not make international shipping, for example. That was a choice. Every work in the Bell Gallery from United States are produced in United States. That was a certain idea for many economic reasons, many ecologic reasons. What was interesting with the French Pavilion, we have important art can walking and can travel and can give like many emotions. The sound can be very physical, and in the same time it is immaterial. The video is unphysical. It can be physical when you decide to make a certain type of installation, and that was an interesting idea to work. In the same time, it was important for me to understand how I can contextualize and just not take that thing here and put this thing here. And it was important to work on how myself I can positionate myself with my idea and find like a human position of sharing. That it is really important for me, find a sharing position. and how I can, yes, try to discuss, to understand a context, and maybe create a discussion. Just put an artwork somewhere, it's not a discussion. You put an artwork and people just need to look, you not discuss with. And when you start to affect the bodies, the sense of the bodies, or question the sense of the bodies, for example, how he can be careful step by step when he walk inside the exhibition, how he can find some element, how he can project himself, for example, that it is really important.
Yeah, I really love that you made a point to share and to describe this idea of being able to present your works in a way where you have, and this is my interpretation, but presenting the work in a way where you have the full autonomy and you have that full human position that you speak about to be able to share something with an audience, with others, in a way that is that is really truly yours. That it's not, what I take away from that is not the deep influence of the gallery space or the deep influence of the curator or an institution, but true creative freedom and the
Mhm.
creative expression to really take your wildest ideas and your imagination and bringing that to life. It sounds like one of the things that's very important to you in your work is being able to have a discussion with the audience and the viewer, and
Yes.
doing that in a way where you have creative freedom to share your ideas in your way and not being beholden to an institution, to a curator, to a gallery, but full expression, right? No restrictions. Can you speak about why that's so
And
important to you?
and you feel that when you visit the show in Venice?
Yes, but also from what you just said, it's a feeling that I'm picking up on from your words. I think the pavilion in Venice was my first encounter with your work. So
Mhm.
to see the show at the Bell it's just interesting to draw so many parallels. There are a lot of parallels between both of the presentations of work, and obviously the fact that this it's an extension, it's an evolution. You're having a dialogue with both works in both spaces. And the fact that it's the first time that a French pavilion is in the US is a beautiful moment. But I think for me as an observer and as somebody who was looking at the work and has seen it and spent a little bit of time with it, there are some of these like binary nuances that I picked up on, like the brightness of the French pavilion, the brightness of the room, the way that no matter what time of day you would enter the pavilion, it would feel as though it was daylight. Whereas in the Bell, it's actually the complete opposite. You
Yes.
feel like you're submerged in the ocean. It's quite dark. There's a lot of shimmering, reflective light. Um,
Yes.
there's a sense that you're somehow underwater or submerged. And then to understand a little bit more of the context of the connections you're drawing between the colonial past of Martinique, being someone who currently lives in France, one can only imagine the experience and the feeling that one holds of the colonial history of that. And I think as a person of the global south, as a person of the African diaspora, it feels very relatable to consider a colonial past as part of your present because you are never separated from it. And then the site of the Bell being in Providence, there are all of these connections that you're drawing. And I think it still brings me back to the original question, which is how that sense of autonomy to create, to display, and to be in discussion with others about your work, the way you show the work, the aesthetic choices that you make about how the work is presented, and being very clear and firm about that, that those decisions to have that autonomy are very important. I think I would just love to hear you share, why is it important to you?
Yes, it's thank you so much. Your thinking and your question is really strong and really important. But I have many things make a distinction. For example, in Venice, I would like to be like just I can say that simply, just Julien Creuzet and I'm a French Caribbean Afro-descendant. When I'm saying that, you understand everything, and I just would like to be myself a French person with my own with all my particularity. And if you remember about Venice, and you remember all the text was present, we never speak about, for example, the term of colonial. We never use the term of slavery. We never use the term of decolonial. We never use, I don't know. It's we never wrote this type of word somewhere. And the work have some more free aspect and more free perception for the audience.
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. It sounds like what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that this this use of language and this choice to not use words like colonialism, slavery, post-colonialism, to simply say that your heritage is from Martinique and you live in France, it already contextualizes enough that one
Yes.
does not have to explicitly say.
Yes, and of course, I have some aspect. It's a part of me, and it depends who you are and how you work. You look the work, etc. And with glasses, you look the work and you feel the work. And I like that because you can create like many entrance, many doors, many windows to go inside the work. I think I like this type of thinking architecture with many possibility. That it is important for me. When I'm travel to United States and I'm travel to Brown University campus, I'm changed. I'm continuing to be a French Caribbean Afro-descendant, but my position changed. I'm like more maybe a guest, maybe a foreigner. I can be like some pretext for many reasons for the university, for the curatorial program or curatorial approach. People can use some doors or some windows of the work and play more with or give more light for this type of part. Also, the architecture changed many things. For example, it's the architecture of the French Pavilion with the cross architecture with the light. It's really different when you go inside the white cube, for example. It changed
Yes.
everything. And for example, with the French Pavilion for have like the light of the day, it was really important. For example, for me, it can't working if you are in the black box without window, without you understand what
Absolutely.
it changed many things. And also one thing is important in Venice for have the light, the full light of the day. We use like another type of technology. We use LED screen, for example. And because the LED produce is light, now in Bell we use a projection, and it makes the room in more dark situation more, and maybe you feel like more inside the ocean or the water, and this perspective can amplify. For example, have like less sculpture in Venice, have like maybe sculpture hanging inside the show. In Bell, I think we have 4 videos and maybe less of 20 works. And I don't know, many things change with that. And of course, it gives another interpretation of the show, but that is really interesting because some architectural contexts, some political and cultural context can give another type of information of the work. And I need to be, of course, think about that with consciousness. I'm not the same person in Paris or in New York or in Providence. I'm not the same person in Senegal when I'm go to Dakar, for example. And all the time I need to position it myself. And the energy, the spirit, the political context of the place change who we are exactly. And human have this possibility for many reasons to have different type of interpretation, and the work have this possibility also.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful, that reflection is so, it just brings up so many emotions for me. The idea that one is not the same person depending on where you are, and that place and time really impacts us. These things they're like fluid, and they're flowing, and they're moving, and they're ever changing, and we are ever changing. And I think being able to step back and recognize that, and then to articulate it in the way that you did, because sometimes those things can be experiences that you feel deeply, but you don't always have language to describe. And just separately, I was in a conversation with someone recently. I've just come back from a week in Chicago, and I went to attend the Black Artists Retreat, which is spearheaded by Theaster Gates. And it's an incredible period of time when artists get to sit together, talk together, discuss ideas. And it's a really generative experience. But in so many of the conversations that I had one that I think is really relevant now to our conversation because of what you just described and being able to speak about something so deep and the idea of change being ever present. I was talking about how important it is for artists to also be writers and for artists to also develop language around their work and being able to communicate their ideas, and that it's not like an artist has to do it, but that the ability to contextualize the work and to speak about the work is something that allows people to more deeply understand it, but it also allows one to be in dialogue, to be in discourse. And I think for me, that also goes back to what you said earlier about not, you don't just place a work in an exhibition space, you open up a possibility for discussion. And yeah, I really appreciate what you said.
Thank you.
So as we maybe round out the episodes, because I feel like we could probably talk about a lot of things, but I think one of the things I do want to draw on for people who are listening in, people who either have or have not seen your work, have been to the Bell, have seen the presentation in Venice. There are so many listeners who come from different parts of the world and obviously have different experiences. So some people may be encountering your work through the show for the first time or have a lot of experience with looking at your work and seeing it. And I'd like to just talk a little bit about the choices. Firstly, the history that you were able to draw on through the Bell as a site, as a point of departure for the work, because of where Providence is and because of its history, its colonial history. And then thinking about the connections between Martinique, this idea of the Atlantic Ocean and traveling across it. We can use the term the transatlantic slave trade. We can use other language to describe that migration. But I want to just hear you speak a little bit about the connections that you were able to draw through these three sites, right? America, Martinique, and France, and bringing that all together in this exhibition at the Bell. Can you share a little bit about that?
What is interesting, I'm not and I have no responsibility about the context and the history of Brown University campus. And it is interesting how it can transform everything. And for many reasons, maybe the context to be in 2025, the political, they just have a new president like the next 6 weeks ago, and how it can change every topic's perspective of someone. And one thing I'm learned is, for example, I have the feeling sometimes we are human are very uncomfortable to use his specific context, his specific country, and the history of the country. I don't know if you understand. For example, I have the sensation in France, for example, the culture maybe prefer work with Afro-American person and Afro-American artist, because it's you can talk about some history, but it is
Correct. Yes,
indirect.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And me, when I'm good there, I can be like, we can question some subject with indirect for the context, and that it is
Yes.
really interesting, but that it's not my responsibility. It's how the context find some solution to speak about something and use, for example, some, you understand when I say diversion?
Do you mean division?
No, no, is when you are a magician,
Ah,
you
diversion. Yes, of course.
when you make diversion and use another way for arriving a certain point. That is really interesting. And maybe we can call that manipulation. Like a person can decide if I'm accept or I'm not accept this type of diversion or this type of manipulation. But that it's very difficult because everywhere we was manipulated by the system and the social political context of the moment. I don't know. Sometimes the question of the diversity can be like a manipulation. It can be good. Sometimes it's look like a certain redemption, but it is a manipulation for what kind of image you would like to create with your context. And some people in this planet always are affected by the manipulation of the image. Have some person who look like very neutral for many historical reasons, and some other is the opposite thing of neutrality. And that changed many perspectives how you can look the work. If I'm start with, I have the sensation Martinique is an island in the Caribbean Ocean. The history makes the Martinique a place like a crossroad, like a carrefour with different connection with ocean and different destination, for example. And it's very easy for me to go to America continent because I think Martinique is part of America continent. It's part of Central America, it's part of South America, it's part of North America. And in the same time, Martinique can connect for the historical reason with Europe, of course. And Martinique was French, Martinique was English, Martinique was Caribbean, Martinique was Taínos, Martinique was Arawak. With the history, Martinique can make very easy way connection, maybe with Senegal, with Benin, with Ghana, with Nigeria, with Europe parts, etc., etc. In the same time, Martinique can very connect very strongly with India, with Asia, and the breadfruit or the bread trees from Pacific Ocean, the sugarcane from the Pacific Ocean. I don't know. And the bougainvillea plants from the Pacific Ocean, all the different type of big trees from the African coasts, etc., etc., and have many connection. Also, I like the idea of my island can offer me a very big page of poetry and philosophy with people like Fanon, with people like Edouard Glissant, with people like Aimé Césaire, etc. And I can extend my imaginary also. And when I feel very close of St. Lucia, Dominique, Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, and Haiti, it can open and extend my also my imaginary. And for me it's very easy to go to Venice and start my travel because I can think about I maybe the glass bead produced in Venice and in Murano,
Glass bead.
and I can use about that. I can use many type of imaginary of Occidental history also. And I feel myself like a bird not ask the authorization to travel.
Ah, yes. That's very interesting to hear you say. Very beautiful way to finish the episode, right? Because there's so many places that you just referenced. Your two shows here also reference different places in the world, and you're pulling on so many different things. This has been such a beautiful episode.
Thank you so much.
Julien, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Everything is Connected. It was such a pleasure to speak with you today. And for all of the folks listening, Julien will tell you a little bit about his show now.
I share with you the title of the show in French because this language it's really important for me. Attila cataracte, ta source au pied des pitons verts finira dans la grande mer. Gouffre, nous nous noyâmes dans les larmes marées de la lune.
The title of the exhibition in English, Attila Cataract, your source at the feet of the green peaks will end up in the great sea, blue abyss, where we drowned in the tidal tears of the moon. Julien's institutional exhibition, which originally debuted at the French Pavilion, in 2024 at the Venice Biennale is on view now at the Bell at Brown University until June 1st, 2025. If you have an opportunity, I encourage you to go see this incredible show and presentation of Julien's work. Julien Creuzet, it was such a pleasure to have you on an episode of Everything is Connected. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much to give me this opportunity.
I want to give a big thank you and a big shout out to Julien for joining me on the show. And it's a wrap, folks. That was our episode of Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected. Conversations on culture and current events with some of today's hottest creative contemporaries. These episodes are recorded remotely and on location wherever in the world that I find myself, whether that be Africa, the US, Europe, the Middle East, or the Caribbean. Depending on where I am at the time of these recordings, you will hear the sights and the sounds of my local environment. I look forward to continuing these wonderful conversations with you, with artists and creative professionals across a variety of industries. I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu, and we'll see you next time. As always, stay motivated, stay inspired, and stay up. Peace and love, y'all. We out.